It's 6:01. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming to our in-person meeting of the building committee. Before we start, I have a request from our recording secretary, who would like us all to go around and simply introduce ourselves, because he finds it easier to identify people on Zoom, because we all have our name on Zoom.
Without a mask, and people have a name on them on Zoom,
So without further ado, I'm going to start here with my good friend, Mr. Fromer from Lancaster.
Ken Fromer from Lancaster.
Thank you.
Amy Cohen from Bolton.
Thank you.
Kurt Downing, Superintendent.
Yep.
Kim Erman. Pat Maroney.
Jennifer Dodgemont.
Sarah Del Ponte Cosentino from Lancaster.
Laura Bailey from Lancaster.
Stacy Dupuy, Bolton.
Leah Viverito, Stowe.
Joseph Gleason from Lancaster.
Bob Sikansky, Bolton.
And Marion, why don't you introduce yourself? And
Yes, my name is Marianne Williams. I'm the project executive with Skanska.
And my name is Sadie Nguyen, and I'm the senior project manager with Skanska.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item is public comment. I don't see anybody here. Oh, I forgot Mr. Frieser's over here.
Sorry.
Facilities coordinator. Okay.
Rob Friedrich, Director of Facilities.
Thank you. We have public comment on the agenda. I don't see anybody here for public comment. Does anybody have any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of meeting minutes. If there's no objection, I would like to dispense with the meeting minutes and hold those over till our next meeting. I got the July 19th, 2021 minutes to you very late. Some of you may not have had a chance to look at them. And there is a small issue on the September 14th, 2021 meeting minutes that I'd like to clarify. So if there's no objection, we can hold off on the meeting minute approval till our next meeting in October. Seeing none, all right, we will go.
Could I just make an observation on the September 14th minutes?
Yeah,
Yes.
I noticed I made a mistake. I wrote Bob instead of Mr. Sikansky.
No, that wasn't it.
Okay. I already fixed that on my Google Doc.
All right, I didn't catch that one, or it didn't register, but in the first item, the move to agenda number 5, it says that the motion was made, but it doesn't say by who. And that was Mr. Rubenstein.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. I'll write that.
Thank you.
And I think, yeah, Jen found some other typos and.
Well, I was late, so I had to
There's
listen.
only one O involved.
I'm sorry?
There's only one O involved.
I got it, I got that.
And by the way, since we're dispensing with the minutes approval, I'll take 30 seconds to give you my little dissertation on minutes. So just so you know, it's not inappropriate when we approve minutes to seek amendments to the minutes if there's a mistake. If you find something in there that you want corrected, you can move to have those corrected. It is with the approval of the entire district committee. Excuse me, I keep saying district committee, I apologize. The building committee. But it is appropriate to amend. And once the minutes are approved, they can be amended even further at a later date. So they're kind of malleable. All right. So without further ado, we are here.
Excuse me, Chair Gleason, can I just ask who's arriving?
Oh, certainly, sorry, Dave Hartnagel,
Hi,
the
Dave.
Stowe representative.
Thank you.
Welcome, Attorney Hartnagel.
Thank you.
Okay. So the first item on our agenda under new business is introduction of our project team from Skanska. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Williams and to introduce herself and her colleague and to tell us a little bit about what you hopefully will be doing for our esteemed district.
Okay, terrific. So we did put together a PowerPoint presentation that, if this is an appropriate time, that we could put on the screen.
Yes, absolutely.
And it would give you an overview of the process and what we hope to accomplish here with your group. So,
I can put it on a thumb drive that the computer's already set up. Or I can put it on the computer.
So while they're getting set up there, I have actually a couple of handouts. I wanted to be mindful that we're speaking to both the school building committee and some folks from the communications committee, and so we tailored it towards both, so that what we're dispersing in terms of information tonight is going to be an example of what you'll see in the meetings that we have. And so Going forward, I mean, the next step will be to get the design team on board. Once the design team is on board, we would start the process for a feasibility study, and that the information that's developed with the input from the community, from the appropriate people, we would end up having that information available to be communicated out to the community. We would also be able to post information, so I'm gonna wait until she gets this up.
Can I ask if you can get this presentation posted on the website for the high school building project?
Yes, absolutely. No, Skanska's been very good about providing all of the PowerPoint and brochure information
Okay.
they provided. So, yes, Miriam did provide the OPM slide presentation, and I'm sure that she will be happy to provide this as well.
Okay.
So, what we tried to do here, and it's not a lot of time, and you'll probably see this same presentation well as we bring the designer on board, so that there'll be more information. We'll just start from the top. So we're going to talk about the MSBA process and next steps. And so I don't think you can have this process without having community engagement and outreach. And we know that we recognize the significance of this program, that this really is about building a future for Lancaster, Bow, and Stowe. And see if you could go on to the next slide. So higher level, where we are in the process, Neshoba is a partner with the Mass School Building Authority. For those that aren't aware of who the Mass School Building Authority is, and I'm presenting this as if we were in a public meeting. Okay, for folks who are not on this committee, if you can keep that in mind, because you might say, I already know. So the MSBA is an independent government agency that was created in 2004, and it's a program that's administered by, with the assistance of the Department of Education. And so the MSBA's mission here is to partner with Massachusetts community to support design and construction of educationally appropriate, flexible, sustainable, and cost-effective public facilities. And what that means is, what we're doing here as a group is to come up with a 50-year solution. It's a long time. And so a 50-year solution requires flexibility because we don't know what we don't know, and the future will reveal that to us. And building that flexibility in, the technology, et cetera, allows the school to keep evolving as times change. Next slide, please. So prior to the feasibility study, the MSBA required the district to partner with them in developing an agreed upon design enrollment. That information looks at historical data. They look at data, they look at that Irish Boston, sorry, accent. There's an R on everything. So what we do is we, they look at the number of births and deaths, and they look back 10 years, and then they try to project 10 years in the future. And so the design enrollment for Neshoba currently is 925 students, and that number is based on an 85% utilization of the school. And so you see that you have room for growth in the program, as you'll see the fluctuations in terms of births in the community. Certain grades are going to keep going up and down over time. So next slide, see. Each district starts with a rate of 31%, which is based on income poverty levels. The base reimbursement rate for the district is 49.53%. This rate gets adjusted annually through the Department of Revenue. So if a community has had an increase in unemployment locally, et cetera, you would see that number go up, or you could see that number go down and the community was doing better. So this number will remain the reimbursement through the feasibility study, but when we submit the final schematic design and project budget and schedule, we will be given another number, and that number may fluctuate. Next slide, please. So in addition to the base reimbursement rate, there's also what they call discretionary incentive points. And so if, for example, you had a model school that was accepted under the MSBA program, you would receive an additional 5% reimbursement. Newly formed regional school district, high efficiency schools. So in looking at your school, I would anticipate right off the bat that you would get 2 points for a high efficiency green school program, that you would get up to somewhere between 1.5% and 2% for best practices for routine and capital maintenance. And CM at risk if that was the path to go. So if you look at renovation and reuse of existing facilities, they'll provide anywhere from 1 to 5% reimbursement. Next slide, see. So what you see here are costs that are categorically ineligible for reimbursement or payment by the Master Building Authority. And so you'll see that they won't pay for the cost of financing or legal fees or site acquisition. All of this information actually comes out of 963 CMR 2.0 or 2.0. And it essentially states that there are some costs that are categorically ineligible, like swimming pools. And then there are some costs that are eligible but become ineligible. So for example, with an auditorium, they will support up to 2/3 of the student enrollment number for the capacity of the auditorium. But if you said, well, okay, we have 925, and so we're going to have an auditorium for 308 students, and then you say, no, but we think, that's a third. We think we're going to do it for 75% of the students, or we want full capacity. Well, they would reimburse for the capacity and the square footage to accommodate what's within their design parameters, their space summary guidelines, but any square footage that exceeded that, they would not reimburse for that, and it would be 100% cost to the district. They would also, on top of that, reduce the funding for the OPM, reduce the funding from the designer, not like huge amounts, but they will reduce it. And then whatever the cost of commissioning those additional square footage of those spaces, they would take that money back as well. So you can see that what they're really trying to do is create equity across all the schools. They present guidelines that are pretty good standards for saying what do we need for spaces, but they're not perfect, and every community is different. And so it will ultimately be the choice of the community, this group, if for some reason, because your practices in the building are different than maybe another community, and you may opt, I know, for example, I'll use Attleboro High School. They wanted to, they couldn't exceed 750 students. Well, they have 1,725, and they said, but that means I can only get the 9th graders in here. I can't get 2 grades at one time. They made a decision that they would spend the extra money so that at the start of school they could bring the 2 students in. But we were also able to look at where else could we build capacity in the school, whether it be through the cafeteria as an example, where they could actually assemble the whole school in the cafeteria, or if they took all the tables and chairs out and then they just set up chairs in a row. So there are lots of strategies and ideas about how to make space flexible, multi-purpose, etc. So that would be our goal in working with the design team and really surveying and listening and understanding what your needs are and what you're looking to accomplish. Go back, see one more. just checked in recently, and the construction costs over $360 a square foot. It's the MSBA's policy is 100% ineligible. Now, they're not saying that you should be able to build a school for $360 a square foot. That's not the case. What they're saying is that's their level of participation, and you're going to see schools that are anywhere between $450 up to $750 per square foot. And whether it's a vocational space or a specialty space, robotics, et cetera, all of those things contribute to cost. So it's an important conversation to have out in the community, so folks don't think that what you're doing here is excessive. And looking at site costs over 8% of direct construction costs, that's really what they're saying is if we took the site out of the equation, what's the value of the building? Okay, if the building is $100 million, as an example, your site cost, they'll participate in reimbursement up to $8 million. But if you exceed the $8 million, the rest of that is ineligible. You almost have to really, it's an amazing spreadsheet to see how they have these checks and balances for really telling you what's eligible and what's ineligible. So if your rate is 49%, that's your reimbursement rate, but eligible costs. But then there's ineligible costs in the project. Your effective rate, sort of like taxes, your effective rate, okay, might end up being 35%. Just to give you some context. Now, these are just rough scale, order of magnitude rules of thumb that I'm trying to offer here, but I think what's really important that when we talk about the communications committee, I'm not sure how large your group is, but everyone on the school building committee, on the school committee, folks that are, like you, Pat, folks who are involved with the project, it's going to be important for everyone to understand so that we're telling a consistent story about where we are and what we're doing. So it says modular units. So for example, if you had temporary modular classrooms, you would not get reimbursement because it's not part of the permanent building program. So sometimes people come up with different ideas about how to address that. So in one community, the Winthrop Middle High School, C and I worked on it together, what they did is a utilization study. Instead of putting modulars in, they assessed where they were with the 4 schools in the community, and they actually reconfigured the grades temporarily, and they didn't have any money going into temporary classrooms. That saved them about $4 million in 2012 dollars. So where I'm going with this is that there's lots of ways that we can be creative and think about, and then sometimes it might be that, no, we really do need, because of the practices that we have with our educational program, need to have those modular classrooms. So the idea is that whether this is new construction, renovation, or renovation addition, we need to be totally transparent in terms of being invisible to the school. So number one goal is to keep the school fully operational. Whatever the preferred solution is here, we keep you folks fully operational. It's not about construction, it's about education, and we come up with strategies and plans around that. But that requires input from the school administration and working towards coming up with what we think is the best plan. I'm not going to read bullet by bullet because I think that's kind of an awful way to present, but just wanted to give you a sampling, and one thing we could see is send them 963 CMR, and it's the grant program. I'll write it down so I don't forget. It's the grant program and talks about all of these things in more depth. Next slide, please. So the MSBA establishes process and standards. It's actually a very linear, prescriptive process. And it's a great roadmap. I mean, I'm impressed with what they've done here. You have the 8 modules, and they tell you, this is our expectation. Here's the roadmap. And, module 2, forming a team, hire hired an OPM, hired a designer. In Module 3, the start of the feasibility study. What's great about that is we have our contracts, the office project manager as well as the designer, that these modules are a wonderful checklist of stating these are the standards, this is the expectation in terms of deliverables. And it's a proven process and it works. Next slide, please. So the first step after the design team is on board will be to put together visioning sessions. We'll have an educational planner who will be involved with the process. That person, it usually goes 3, sometimes 4 days. You have individuals, whether it's police, fire, teachers, students, getting that kind of feedback from the community. You're getting buy-in, you're getting an understanding. Again, I'm repeating myself. What are the practices in the building? What works? What doesn't work? What would you envision for the future? And that 3 to 4 day session. At the end of that session is all that information. You're guided by a professional. All of that information is then information that can be used to update the educational plan. I love your educational plan, by the way. I think it's great. And to have somebody who is a professional educational planner who helps design schools and really, you think outside the box. Where is the world going? This is going to be important to be able to have that kind of collaboration that takes place. And so even though you have a draft educational plan, in Module 3, it's very prescriptive what they'd like to see in your educational plan. I haven't yet reviewed it line by line to see if you've met the criteria of what the Mass School Building Authority is looking for. But certainly there's opportunity to edit this. And for anyone who may or may not have experience in writing an educational plan, because sometimes we go to communities and they don't exist. And so I always say, surround yourself with people that know what they're doing. So whether it's the lead of the science department, they can write that piece. If it's special education, you have somebody else who can work on that piece. And it's a great way to pull a very powerful plan together about how you're going to move in the future. The reason why this is so important is that your educational plan is really the basis of design. It's the roadmap. This is what we're looking to accomplish. And this is what the Mass School Building Authority is going to measure. And so, at the end, when the educational plan is complete, and it's sent off to the Department of Education, and they give it a blessing, and they say, yes, we think you have a solid plan. What you'll see is that the design team is accountable, and we're accountable to make sure they're doing this. The design team is accountable for making sure that the design supports every bit of your educational plan. And so when you look at all of the options, whether it's renovation, new construction, etc., the plan's going to be, some options are going to support the plan better than other options. And so the whole idea is, what is the plan that best supports your educational plan, and then is the most cost-effective solution. So that's where we're going, and I'm probably stealing the architect's thunder, but there'll be plenty of time for them to get it back and do something there. So building the project team. You'll see that you have gone through a lot already. You've done a lot of work, and there's more to be done. And so here's the part where we start not only talking about the building project, but talking about creating champions in the community. You have 3 communities. I kind of think of it as a campaign. Okay, so you can identify a person in each community, but then it's sort of like having neighborhoods and precincts. Who are those champions going to be? Who cares about what's happening at the school and is willing to work for it? And so there's a process, and I won't get into it tonight, but at some point we'll get the Office of Campaign and Finance out there to tell you how to not get in trouble, what you can do, what you can't do. how you can raise money, where you can raise it or not, whether it's school property or not, and that there's a process for this, and when in doubt, make a phone call. So I don't pretend to know more than they do, I just know not to get in trouble, and I invite them on every project I'm on to present to the group and allow the community to ask the questions that they have. So, any questions before I keep going? Okay.
I only have about 12.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe we
That's
should wait till
okay.
you
Yeah,
finish.
you better wait till the end of this,
Yeah.
then, you probably have a ton of questions, Mary.
Yeah, I'm finally like not being nervous anymore, but I still have to breathe. So, building the project team. This is the designer selection timeline. It's not 100% accurate because we have to go through our process here. But I needed to give you something to look at and understand that the stage we're at right now is we have a draft of the designer request for services. And that tonight we're at the school building committee meeting and we should talk about what the process is and that we need to select 3 members, one from the school building committee, the superintendent or their designee, and the third one would be the CEO of the community or the equivalent. So given that you have 3 towns, I'm not sure whether that would be Don Lowe or how that would operate, but the school is in this town, so that's something that we would need to confirm, and we have a little time to figure that out. So would recommend that if you had any questions to review it with your legal counsel. What we did when we put the draft together is that we took the information from the OPM's RFS, which Pat, I think you wrote it. Did you write the RFS? So you have a
Oh,
template.
no, I didn't write it down. That was the template from MSBA.
MSBA, well, they have the template, but then the supplemental information, the statement of interest, the specific issues, the deficiencies in the school, et cetera. The fact that you have a gas main and you have a well next to an oil tank in the boiler room down in the front. Those, all that information
And the
makes
bodies
it.
that are buried.
And the bodies and everything. All that information, we use the OPM's RFS to inform the designer's
Oh, I
RFS.
see what you're saying.
So there's nothing more to add there, other than that I would ask permission that we share with the designers, let them be creative here, your educational plan. It's a great which also informed the OPM RFS. Some of it was put in there. And I think that that process of allowing people to really, they're going to look at it a little bit different than how the OPM might look at it, and let's see what it triggers for them. And I think it's a good move I would recommend doing that. So I believe with a couple of minor edits to be done to correct the dates and any typos or misspellings, that ideally I would love to submit the RFS as soon as tomorrow, but if we can't do it tomorrow, certainly no later than September 28th. And then that would give the Mass School Building Authority an opportunity that they can take up to 10 days. I do have a call into their project manager, Christina Ford, to see if I can squeak a few days out of her there and shorten that duration and maybe target an earlier designer selection board meeting. So the response to the RFS would be due on the timeline presented October 13th. And I'm sorry, the designer would prepare their response from October 13th through October 29th. It gives them 2 weeks, 2 days. The minimum requirement is 2 weeks. And frankly, these folks are doing this all the time. They could do it in 2 days. But we follow the statute and the requirements there. And then we would have an informational meeting and site visit for the designer. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. Give them an opportunity to get a sense of the scale and the landscape here and ask any questions that might be of concern to them, and then move on to, say, okay, Friday the 22nd of October, this is your last day for questions, so that, assuming Pat and I are going to partner here, that we would, whatever questions we had, it would give us sufficient time to get responses out and not delay the schedule at all in terms of pushing it out for when the proposal response is due. So what we see is, once we get the applications, what would happen is C and I would come down and, however many firms you have, we need to break them into the packages for the MSBA so that it's one of each design firm, that information makes it into a reconfigured package, and we would get that information up to Boston to the Mass School Building Authority. And then we would start a process of calling, checking references. We would put a matrix together where we would review all of the applications to see if they're fully responsive, which means we wouldn't disqualify them, and then do a comparative analysis about whether somebody has that kind of experience with scope, scale, what is their capacity with their current workload. There's probably almost 20 different criteria there that we would evaluate them on, and look at what we would think would be most advantageous. And checking the references, that's really important to understand. You ask everybody the same questions, but if somebody says, oh yeah, we had 10% change orders, you're like, oh, I don't think we want them, because it means you didn't have a good design, a good biddable set of documents, and we need to take all those different things into consideration, because this is about mitigating risk and making an efficient use of your money and the funds available for the project. I'm trying to see where I left off. So then the MSBA would like up to 4 weeks for them to repackage and send out to the designer selection panel. They have a 13-member panel, and we would be targeting the November 30th designer selection panel to review the applications, and then they rank the firms, and then the next thing they would do is 2 weeks later, unless the numbers were like clearly hands down, this is the perfect firm for your project, and the points are as such that we don't think we need to go get interviews. But most of the time they go to interviews, and it's an opportunity, because sometimes the firm you think you want to work with isn't necessarily the firm who you end up selecting, because the interviews might give you more information, and even though you have 3 votes locally, they have 13, and so I don't mean to say could tip it any way they want. So it could go whatever direction they think, because they're looking at applications all the time, and sometimes they say, let's spread the work. Okay, or let's give this firm a break. They did really well on a couple of smaller projects, and we have a larger this is a larger project that we think they could do it. So we're not always aware of those conversations, and I'm saying it because I served for 6 years on DCAM's designer selection panel. So I'm telling you the conversations I would hear. They're from out of state, not this one does it. And it's, people have their reason, but the whole idea is, my recommendation would be the 3 members that go into this committee have a unified voice. Because if you have 3 different opinions, then they're going to say, well, the district doesn't really care who you pick. They're not in an agreement, and so they'll make that choice for you, so to speak. And then you have approval of the designer fee proposal and contract. And something that is an interesting thing, and I put it out here, and it doesn't have to be decided in this moment, but certainly sooner than later, in the next week or so, that you can actually advertise the fee for the designer. Okay? And what you get from advertising the fee, they don't tell you that until a later module, but what you get from advertising the fee is that you don't lose that potential up to 30 days to negotiate. Now, with one of the projects I was on, we were gonna negotiate the fee. And the designer came in, ranked first. They were a great firm, I'm not gonna mention names. People would know them. They ranked the firm, and at the time, we're going back years, probably 10 years ago, they were looking for double the budget that they had for the feasibility study. Double. And they were saying, well, you just have to go back to the community and tell them. I'm saying, no, you don't understand. Your fee is not in keeping with what we see for feasibility studies, et cetera. And so they chose to walk away, but 3 to 4 weeks went by, and then we had to start over with the next. So if there's an assessment, and there's pros and cons for this, but if there's an assessment that time is money, and we want to get started on a feasibility study as soon as possible in January, then I would suggest that we come up with a number that we think is a reasonable number, that's fair and equitable, and that you will have somebody's attention, okay, to the point where you don't want to make the fee too low that you're not going to attract the kind of firms you want, but you don't want to make it a blank check either. So I think it's something worth discussing, that if you can pick up a month in the schedule. In my mind, that's a big deal, because you'll see when we go further down the road, and see, you can go to the next one. Yeah, I was thinking more about, if you can fast forward a little to the, I'm looking for the, yes, that, which nobody can read, so I have hard copies, I to next few folks to pass around.
You don't hear anything, it saves them. I gave everybody a copy of that.
You did?
Yes, they all have that timeline, yep.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, so.
I'll take
this
it.
extra
I'd
if you
still
have
like
one.
a printed copy,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Yeah,
That'd
so,
be great, and I didn't get to print today.
because I'm not as farsighted as I
I
used to
didn't
be,
get it.
I can't see it as well.
I can't get on
Um,
Wi-Fi, so.
So what this timeline shows is that it's going back to what Amy said, and I apologize, Amy, I feel like I know you because I watched all the school building committee meetings leading up to,
Good for you.
up to this, and it was like, she can talk community engagement, and, no, it was important, somebody else cared about something, but that is what we did, and so, and that there might be concern about having this be not a speedy process, but that we'd be efficient with the process. And so, and looking at getting to years, and it starts now, you can see that the feasibility study, and we fast forward and we get down to a vote, it looks like that the MSBA Board of Directors meeting, after you submit your schematic design, would put you at about August 30th, 31st, the schedule isn't published with them, 2023. And so why this is important is because we look at when can we start construction. If we went CM at risk, we'd be able to start construction before the completion of the design. It's a proven delivery methodology that we have utilized successfully over and over again. And it would give you an opportunity that if you could get the site and the foundations and the underground utilities and the steel structure and the steel ordered. It used to be that steel was 16 to 20 weeks out. Right now, given what's happening in the world, it's a lot longer. And so there's a lot of uncertainty there. And so what we're looking at is, if we run out this schedule, which was informed by a longer Gantt chart, and I just pulled out the highlights here, what we're seeing is it could be the difference between nobody likes to move, and I would ask your superintendent, nobody likes to move in December.
Just did it last year.
You just did, and it's awful, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a challenge, but we got it done.
But if you could move over the summer,
Yeah, it's better. What we actually did is we had to move into the new building without a gymnasium because the gymnasium was over the footprint of the old building. So then they had to tear the old building down, we built a new gymnasium this summer, and the kids moved in. The new gym at the start of school, but yes, it's a bit complicated. Summer's a much better time.
Exactly. So this isn't a perfect schedule. This is just based on the information that was available, but you can see what our thought process is and what we're working towards. The other thing is that typically with designers, even though the feasibility study says 20 to 24 months, they're more interested in the 14 months after the completion of the schematic design because of the sheer volume of design work that has to take place. So even though you might be one board cycle shorter on the feasibility study, they're going to want to make up those 2 months on the other side when they start module 6. And so what I'm showing in yellow is that where it says early bids and main bids, you can see that in going through the design process in the early reviews that we could actually start construction. You see the yellow milestone there where it says construction 2 to 3 years in green versus in the black where if we did design, bid, build, which is a linear process, okay, versus you're overlapping, you're still doing design, but you can start construction, you can see that you could pick up 6 or 8 months, and this would have to be evaluated more closely as we engage the design team, et cetera. So, but the story it tells is, depending on what the solution is, the preferred solution, will tell you whether it's 2.5, 3-year project, and how does that line up with getting you into the school over a summer, which would be maybe more ideal than December. That's all that I'm saying. So this is what we're working towards, and whatever we can do to capture time up front in the schedule gives us greater flexibility down the road. So that kind of gives you a little insight into our thought process there. So see, now the challenge is, which slide did we leave off of?
There's one with all the dates on it.
Yeah.
Oh, there we are.
Okay,
Yep.
yep, right there.
Okay. So that's the rationale of our thinking here. So go back one more.
Yeah.
So that's right there. So in looking at your mission statement and core values, this has to be part of the foundation of the education plan and to be supported in the design program. Your mission aligns very nicely with the Mass Building Authority's mission and the opportunities for your community. Next slide, please. So the feasibility study, I think, is the earliest and most important part of the design process, because that's where we gather everybody together, we get all the information. We understand what the existing conditions are in the building, that needs to be evaluated, establishment of goals and objectives, and fine-tuning that educational program. You know, because there's all this input that's coming back, and the best ideas are going to bubble up to the top. Next slide, please. So in short, what you're looking at there is Module 3 and Module 4. Feasibility study over 20 to 24 months. There are 3 major efforts, and the first effort being the preliminary design program. So making up the numbers, but they're based on real types of examples. So you might look at 6 to 12 different options, okay? You still have to look at an option for new construction, renovation, and reno addition. But you might look at an option that's in the field, You might look at whether it's an addition or a new school. You might look at another site, because, you know, we might start doing some site investigation and discover, you know what, we can't put the school there. There's all kinds of peat out there. And, you know, it would be more expensive to do foundations in that setting versus another setting. So we're making those evaluations. We're not going in with an agenda about what the best solution is, whether it should be new or not. We let the information inform the decision making. And things are not always as they appear to be. But when we establish evaluating those options, that we put pricing together against comparable pricing against those options, and then we look at, you know, the pros and cons. Does it support the educational program or not, and how well? And so that preliminary design program, you're going to look. It's basically going to be like little floor plans, sketches. It's, you know, it's capturing the educational programming, but you're not going to be looking at a building. Okay. The next step is, once we've satisfied that first submission with the MSBA, they may or may not ask us to go to a facilities assessment subcommittee meeting. We would then, with their approval, move into the preferred schematic report. We would go from those 6 to 12 options to maybe 3 or 4. And we would say, let's focus on these. These are really the better choices here. And let's take a deeper dive on that. And those 3 or 4 options come out of the first grouping of 6 to 12. Not introducing new ideas. We're figuring out all the what ifs up front. And then after you complete your preferred schematic report, I'll tell you what we did in another community. We had a public meeting. We had all these different color stickers. And this, you know, one was for, you know, first, second, third, fourth choice. And what was fascinating to me was that all but 6, and there was over 100 people at the meeting, all but 6 of the dots landed on one option. And it was like community consensus. At least the people that showed up and evaluated, and we did the presentation and answered their questions. That community, the vote was 67% for the project. And so that has to do with consensus and bringing people along the entire way. Everything we do, our collective board product is going to be public information. And we're going to have community meetings. We're going to have the opportunity for people to ask questions and have a very thoughtful, engaging process. So then, with the preferred schematic report, we're submitting to the Masco Building Authority. We're saying, look, here's the 4 options we've narrowed it to, but here's our preferred option. And whatever that is, it is. And then they review, and they either concur or they don't. It's not that they're trying to make a decision for you. They want to make sure that there was truly a thoughtful feasibility study process, that we were really looking at the issues, and they will know if there's gaps in the information. So there's no cutting corners here. And it's a disservice if the team did. So then, with the board's approval, in October 27, 2022, that's a real date, by the way, we're then given authorization to proceed into schematic design. And typically, conceptual design might be, 5% of the information. Schematic might be 15% of the information. The Masco Building Authority really has us develop it to a level where it's like 25% complete, and that there's enough information that you can put together a very good cost estimate, a construction schedule, because there's enough information there to say, okay, how long is this going to take us to build? And so that there's enough information and the specifications and the drawings to put together that construction budget, and then C&I will work on the rest of it, which is, design fee, OPM fee, contingencies, furniture do we need to add to the budget, because Mass School Building Authority might provide $2,400 per student, and we might tell you we think you need $3,800 per student. And it all, you know, it all depends on how much you have in the school that can be salvaged, and in some schools, there's not very much that can be salvaged, just because it could be 30, 40 years old, the furniture, the equipment, et cetera. So that's where we, you know, the devil's in the details, and at the end of schematic design, they, and you'll see in that little schedule we handed out, that there's what they call a project scope and budget conference. And so that's when the MSBA will meet with this group here, and the OPM and the designer, and have the conversation about, you know, confirming, actually, it's really about confirming your understanding. Do you understand that this is the budget? Do you understand that this is the schedule? Do you understand this is how much you're gonna have to bond for the project? And they're very good at checking the boxes and making sure all the relevant information and understanding is there. And then you have 120 days to, up to 120 days from August 30th to have your local debt exclusion vote, assuming that's the process here. And you could do it September 1st, or you could do it December 31st. Or, they don't tell you this until March 05, that you could actually approve it before they approve the project, which is something we did in Winchester, for Winchester High School. They approved, the town voted to approve the project contingent on MSBA approval. And that was a beautiful thing, 4 months, right there. Can you imagine hitting the ground running September 1st with your design team for the next leg of the race versus whatever that time might be? So it's, you know, it's an interesting process, it's an option. Further discussion is needed, but trying to open this up to you about, like, there's lots of ways here to be efficient, because if you look at escalation in the market right now, nobody really likes to talk about it, but escalation in construction, it's inflation. If you look at the cost of materials, et cetera, you know, historically inflation used to be 2.5% to 3.5%. We've had some years where, you know, certain sectors have gone up, like lumber, steel, copper, et cetera. So let's say it was 5%. If you had 5% inflation, and I'm not saying this is the value of your project, you had 5% inflation on a construction project of $100 million, that would be, all of a sudden you're at $105 million for the project. So time is money, and anything we can do to help have the dollars available go into the program and not evaporate as a function of time, it's critical. It doesn't mean, though, we skip any steps in the process. We can't and we won't, but it's about just trying to find ways to be efficient, and, you know, money saved in escalation is money that can go into the building program. So, I saw this and I liked it, so I put it up there. Who are we? You know, when you start thinking about what can you do in terms of community outreach, we'll tell them who you are, and what you do, and what your design is about, and what it does for the community, and what it does for the students. You know, this is similar to what you would have seen on the Minuteman brochures that went out they were mailed out to the community. So there's lots of ideas, there's lots of things that have been done in different communities, and I say steal with pride. Look at where people have been successful and try and implement those strategies. So the communications plan is really about getting to yes. I think getting to yes means building relationships, community partnership, and leadership and communication. The more informed this group is, And the more you can have other people be informed, the bigger the voice is in the community. Next slide, please. So these are some of the things, you know, Winthrop had bumper stickers called Winthrop's Worth It. And they did surveys to get feedback about what people would like to see in the school or not. You know, so they were informal, you know, monkey survey. And then, you know, lower right-hand corner, Attleboro was putting out a weekly newsletter that talked about the program, and they were answering questions every week. You know, why a new building? Why can't, what's wrong with the one we have? And so we have a body of work and questions, frequently asked questions, that can be utilized along with the renderings and the information that's been developed by the design team through the process. There's events that take place, whether it's a car wash or a pizza party, fundraising for the campaign, but you can see that there's lots of things that can be done to provide information on a continual basis. You can have open houses at the school, you can have community meetings, informal events such as we talked about with the preferred schematic report. You can have public forums, workshops, project website, cable access, meetings being recorded are really helpful. You can have your YouTube videos, and you can ask people, reach out if you'd like to be involved. And so it's like a grassroots campaign. And who doesn't love their kids? That's what I'm saying. It's like, this is really about, and so you know, that's the place I think to start. Next slide, please. So we talked about the MSBA process. Folks have a copy of the SCANSPA schedule. Next slide, please. Higher level, we're right at forming the project team. Hope to be at the feasibility study in January. It's a very dynamic process. I would even venture to say it's an enjoyable process. I work in the industry, so I like it. And that it's pretty amazing how you go through each of these steps here and you look back, and one of these days you'll be saying, oh my God, look at our school. God, look what we did in this short period of time. 6 or 8 years. Okay. Next one. Overall project schedule, we talked about that. Folks have handouts. If anybody wants the more boring, detailed Gantt chart, I'm happy to distribute that as well, that inform this. But it's really just to give you a graphic representation of the milestones as we go along the way. And it's not only a timeline, but it is a reminder of the types of decisions that we can make. Whether the decisions are about an early vote, whether it's a decision about CM at risk, whether it's a decision about whatever, you know, do we want to start construction before the completion of design? So, next slide, please. The communication tools that will be available, website, project email. I would recommend, and I can only imagine because they're so, you know, excited in the other communities that I work in, that I could give you names of somebody in another community who took it on as a school committee member or as a school building committee member. And if you listen to them, they'll tell you how excited they were. And I could show you work product, and I don't want to print reams and reams of paper, but I do have some information for you.
Yeah.
A few copies that you can share with. How many folks are on your committee?
5?
Five.
It's
Okay.
small.
It's small.
But mighty. Small
Small but mighty.
That's
Small
what I
but
was going
mighty.
to say, Leah.
And I think, is that the last one more slide?
One more slide, just to look ahead.
Yeah. So, looking ahead 4 months from now, we'd like to have a designer on board. That's where the next piece of work starts. Over the next 4 months, let's develop a communications plan project website, it's, you know, life by the inch is a cinch, life by the yard is hard. So we're gonna start in steps. And so first step is, let's be satisfied with a project website. Let's create a project email list. Interested parties, people who want to know what's going on. Some people will want to be on that list, some people won't. Some people will, you'll end up cultivating volunteers out of it, and some people you will cultivate critics. And you just have to be prepared that that will happen, but we will be with you and answering questions and providing solid information. So future meetings, I envision that we would talk about the website and updates, and we would schedule a community forum. I would ask that we do that when the designer is on board, so that we have some interesting renderings to look at, starting to see the formation of an actual project and insight, and it will give us, certainly after we've gone through the visioning process, it won't be me talking, it will be you talking about, oh my God, this is what we learned, this is what we think we'd like to do, and that's much more powerful coming from you than coming from me. And local media, as an example, you can make an announcement that Skansco was hired. You can make an announcement that your designer was hired. You can make an announcement that you're going to have visioning sessions if anybody in the community might be interested in participating for 3 to 4 days. Just go from there. It's just keep putting the invitation out there to participate and to join you in this adventure. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But I didn't know if anybody has any questions. And
I'm sure a lot of people have a ton of questions.
okay.
Put the lights on.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the superintendent. He indicated he had some questions, so I'll start with Mr. John.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I think we'll start with the most immediate question I have, and then I'll listen to others to see if it checks off some of my questions. So my question is sort of long-winded to sort of educate the room as well, and some of you are aware of this. As we look at the educational plan, it's very much a current state document. And so we're in a project of, we're in the process now of building desired state. And so we engaged the high school faculty in sort of a kickoff last Friday around thinking about, we did watch the High Tech High video and just thought about
Yes.
as a way to just sort of activate our scheme and thinking about possibilities, right? I actually have a meeting tomorrow morning here with some district leaders and principal around laying the schedule for site visits to other schools.
Yes.
So I would love a couple of recommendations for you. I can get that after the meeting. And then also, as we're doing that, the site visits to other schools, we're also engaging in our profile of the Neshoba graduate process. And so when I look at the timeline and see the educational visioning and goals December of 2021, is that a suggestion that we sort of need to get these visioning processes completed really by that point in time? Or are we looking down the road at the community forum, sort of like you said, the 3-session workshop with the community to gather more feedback from the community? Like, how crunched is my timeline in pulling together the constituents to contribute to that vision?
Well, I actually look at this, even though you're right, the dot is in December in terms of process, but I envision that having the educational planner on board by the time the designer executes their contract, et cetera, that those sessions would take place in January. So I would say that we have a couple of months here.
So the school district did secure a consultant that worked on the school project, the school proposal, the educational profile, thank you.
Yeah.
And so we're going to continue, and we worked with our faculty
Yes.
the past year and a half in their team formats to gather, you know, so there's been a lot of data gathering in that regard. And so my meeting is with him tomorrow to go into the next steps and goals and responsibilities in order to the culmination of his consultant contract will be in producing that visioning plan. So should I then paint his timeline to when we get after our community input on those things as well?
That's a great question. You're talking about Jake Foster?
I am.
Okay. Well, I think what's been done to date is excellent, and I wouldn't discourage you from stopping, because I
Yeah.
think what happens with the educational plan is going to keep evolving.
Right,
I would encourage you to continue to have that meeting, and then there will be
right.
a separate visioning that'll take place through the design firm, because it's taking what you have and taking it a little further, okay, so that it can become the basis of design for the building. And so I wouldn't discourage you from meeting with them.
Yeah, we'll have the meeting, and so this group and Leah's our outreach for community participation in our site visits, because we want to use that as sort of stimulation around our thinking with an evaluative process to bring back to our team, so we can be thinking about educational programming, so that when we get to the point of talking about space matching, that we have that in process as well, along with our profile, the portrait of the graduate
Yeah, this
process.
is the stronger, the stronger this document is, the better off you are in going into the next step. I don't know if your question is whether you think this
So
is
what
a
I'm hearing
redundant
is I don't
process.
have a hard deliverable to give you by winter vacation, that process can leak over the first of the year to ensure that we get all of our constituents in the conversations on that.
Absolutely, because what I envision is if we do visioning with the educational planner, okay, then I would anticipate that you would start updating, actually it's on the schedule, you would start updating your ed plan right after that, so February. And it would give you 60, 70 days to tighten up the direction you're going in.
So that means if I can get the portrait of the graduate done by February vacation, that could be included in the plan.
So I have it in my
Important.
schedule, which we're just really meeting for the first time. I'm just trying to map out a rough schedule that I anticipate between February 1st and April 6th, that you would be finalizing that draft of the educational plan, and it would be going to the Mass School Building Authority, and they would send it to DESE.
I'm just going to sit back and relax now. You opened up my life for me a little bit today. I've been a little crunched for how we're going to build the plan. Our meeting is going to go very well tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have anything else?
I do have more, Mr. Chair, but I will have others.
Does anybody else like? Go ahead, Jack.
A couple of questions. Quick one. In the first slide, when you talked about credits, and does the MSBA take into consideration that the district redid center school, and I believe it was under the model schools? Do we get any credit points for newer schools in our district? Does that work in our favor?
No, it's decoupled.
Got it.
This is a standalone
Thought I would ask. Okay.
project.
Good work.
You did that. Good question.
Yes.
Coupon.
Right.
So
I
the
know.
question for you
Coupon.
is if you had work done on this building
Yeah.
and you received money from the Mass School Building Authority, let's say you had a new roof done,
Yeah.
then they would say, by the time we move into the school, the roof is 15 years old
Yeah.
and it should have lasted 20 years, they would reclaim.
So that would have been if we had decided to go with our science lab projects, which the town voted down. Okay,
Correct.
thank you. Excellent, just thought I would throw that coupon at you.
I like
Okay,
that.
so with the DSP, the designer selection process, you mentioned that that's a 3-member committee.
Locally,
Locally,
yes.
consisting of the superintendent or his designee, a school building committee member, and a person that you referred to as a CEO.
Correct.
And you mentioned the select person from Bolton. Because
Administrator.
town administrator from Bolton. Why would that be where the district, where this building process is a 3-town process? Why would Bolton get to sit on the committee and not Stowe's town administrator or Lancaster's town administrator?
Well, you get to choose 3 people,
Okay,
and they reference it as the equivalent of the CEO.
yeah,
And because it's, the school is in Bolton, but I don't have any
okay.
preference.
Can I just add something? I realize that's what you were saying. You were basically saying because of the
Yeah,
buildings
no, I
in
realize
Bolton.
that.
But just so you understand, Jen, and I don't mean to steal your thunder here, that it's my understanding that between the 3 CEOs, between the 3
Yeah.
town administrators, they kind of coordinate things
Great,
together.
that's good to know.
And we have Orlando on the committee, and I had it in my mind when she mentioned that it, ideally, it would probably be Orlando, but Orlando might want to talk to, you know, Mr. Lowe and the town administrator from Stowe, and they can decide amongst themselves who might be the designee.
Got it, thank you. And then my last quick question.
Orlando's already on this.
So Orlando's
Right.
on the committee,
Right.
hasn't been in attendance, but he's on the committee.
Correct.
So my next question is the last question, thank you for your patience. So I'm interested in understanding just, when we get to the place somewhere around 2023, and you mentioned September 1st or December 1st, voting on the feasibility study. So that is when the towns would bring to their town meeting, whether it's a special town meeting, and they would present the results of the feasibility study, and we could either vote based on the acceptance of the feasibility study, or we could vote in anticipation of that, correct?
Correct, and I don't want to mince words, but I do want to correct the terminology.
Okay, good,
that-
that's what I wanted to make sure I was correct.
That, see, you
Yeah.
put the slide up, with the red background. Okay, oh, back one. You just flew by, right there. Okay.
Mhm.
So the feasibility study is from January
Mhm.
2022 to approximately October 2022.
Okay,
It's the schematic design that the community votes on. They're voting on funding the project, where
That's-
you've narrowed it down to one option,
yeah,
and every community's different. You know, if it's a large city, they might
Mhm.
fund it without a debt exclusion vote, such as the city of Boston or Lowell, and, you know, but I'm assuming, without having direct knowledge, that it's gonna require a debt exclusion vote by
Mhm.
the 3 member communities.
Yes.
Based on your regional agreement.
yes.
Oh, I-
So then
I
that
think-
vote, the schematic design report is a vote, and I apologize for mixing up the terminology.
No.
The schematic design then, funding the project, basically comes in 2023.
Yes.
Okay. And so it's my understanding that that vote requires a unanimous vote from all 3 communities to fund the project. Am I correct? I believe I am.
I would have to look at your
Yeah,
regional.
but I believe I am correct.
You
Okay.
You are.
So that's
So
a
it's-
unanimous, unlike the school budget, which is a 2/3 vote. This has to be a unanimous vote to fund the project. Okay, thank you.
I'm not.
No, that's what it is,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Acknowledging.
Yes,
Scary.
it is scary. That's where the work comes
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
That's where the work comes in.
But I
Yeah.
think there has to be a special town meeting or a special vote by the towns, irregardless of whether it's a debt exclusion, because
It does.
it has to authorize, they have to authorize the school district to take on the debt.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. Yep.
But
Thank
it
you.
does have to be unanimous. That's
It
all
does,
3
unanimous.
And
Thank you.
we've seen that before.
Yes.
We've seen where one town has not voted,
Mhm.
yeah, not mentioning the town. but-
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I don't know if you know Dr. McQuillan, but he would be a great person to speak with about their process, because there were 16 communities, and then they amended their regional agreement so that it allowed some communities to drop out that really were not high sending communities,
I know,
so to
yeah.
speak. And there was one town in that group that voted against the project,
Mhm.
because they didn't understand, yes, because they didn't understand the language
Right.
in the regional agreement. And so they did end up going for a second vote,
Mhm.
and then it passed successfully, and those half a dozen communities that I think in total were probably less than, all combined, 30 to 50 students withdrew.
Right. Thank you. I remember that.
Okay.
Leah, go ahead.
So just to continue on that, and really to what something Bob just said,
Can it happen at the regular town meeting, or are you saying that it has to happen at a special town meeting?
Does not have to happen. Mary Ann is suggesting it could happen at the annual
Right.
town meeting prior to
Yep.
Yeah,
August 30th.
so that is a potential option for us?
That
Right.
is, yeah, that's a possibility.
But I'm just wondering if in May, we would have any concept of the cost.
This coming
You're
May?
talking about March,
Oh, because
because that's
Yeah.
when the warrant is
Yeah.
created. You gotta know in March.
March
March of
2023.
we
2023.
wouldn't, would we have any understanding of what they would even be voting on?
In March of 2023,
Yeah.
it's nothing this
I would
year.
imagine.
Right, but like the schematic design is not due until, say, like June,
Right.
Like, you're
Right, so
now-
June 28th, we're submitting to the Mass School Building Authority, which means I'm notifying them 10 days before that
Mhm.
to certify that we're within your budget.
Mhm.
And the 5 to 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks before that, we're reconciling two independent cost estimates so that we have a high level of certainty about this is the cost of the project, and we would have a pretty good idea of order of magnitude.
In March of 20?
No more like May
Okay.
of
So it
2020.
seems to me like a special election, or excuse me, a special town meeting is in order.
I'll be upfront, I don't like special elections, but I think
Right.
if you can't really describe the benefits in March, you're better off with a special
Right.
town election.
Yeah.
And that's what we did in Stowe when we built the center school.
Yeah.
They had to be special town meeting to describe the benefits and everything, aside from the regular budget items.
3 special town meetings.
Yeah.
We'll have to have 3,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah. Mhm.
Well,
Probably
again, that-
safer.
I would guess they'd be coordinated.
Have a percentage of the
Coordinated?
building, or does it
I would want to see that, yeah. But that's not for us to decide.
Right.
All right, is there any other questions? Go ahead, Laura.
Does there have to be a percentage of the voting populace present, or
No.
does there have to be
No.
some kind of?
Majority of the people that-
Okay,
And if your town doesn't have a quorum
okay.
requirement, you can put as few people in there as possible. If they vote in
Yep.
favor of it, that's how it works. It's a wonderful town meeting government we have in
Thank you
Massachusetts.
to the Puritans.
Yeah. All right, are there any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Carter.
Obviously, you guys have, I think, what, 4, maybe not anymore, but a few regional projects
Yes.
you're working on right now. I mean, I can probably surmise what the answer is going to be, but I guess I want to hear you say it. Which is, as a regional district ourselves, like what lessons can we take from what your experience has worked in those regions, and frankly, what hasn't worked? Whether it be these projects or past ones.
Well, what I would say is, I think communicating often and frequently, but not over-communicating, because people don't want to hear the same thing over and over again. But, things to think about is, do you have meetings here, or do you have meetings in each of the 3 towns? I know with Lowell, as an example, very large city, 3,500 students. I think we did almost 40 community meetings. Okay. Now, not every community is like that. It's because of public transportation and going out and having interpreters and, 60 different languages spoken at that school. So that was a little bit different situation, but you do what you have to do to make sure that you can get the message out, that people can ask their questions and understand it in their own terms. So, I would say just in terms of region, I mean, Minuteman ended up being a 4-year feasibility study. Okay, and I think it was because it was 16 communities. And then once we got past that, it just, we were on our way. It was, it was a good project. The school's very happy. But I think with, I think because of the sheer volume of, you had town managers, you had school committee and 16 members from 16 different towns, and information maybe not making it back. So for example, if we're all in the meeting and then information didn't make it back to the members of the community in Stowe or in Lancaster, people don't like to vote for something blindly. They really need to be educated and And we have to demonstrate what the value is. And the, you know, the solution, right, it's not what I think, it's what works best for the community. And so I think it's a long, thoughtful process, but the engagement makes a difference. If you're not engaged in the process, I don't know, I can't imagine how we could go very far. But if you could get people excited about what's happening in their community and the opportunities for their children and programs that are, you know, we're in a world economy now. And so students are competing, you know, in a world economy when they graduate. So I hope that answered your question.
Does anybody else have any questions at all? I had a couple of quick questions, then I'll turn it back over to the superintendent. I'll be the first to admit I'm not as ethereal as my fellow committee members, so my questions are really more elementary. First thing, you talked about this design selection committee. Your date had it as of today, but that's not on our agenda tonight. We are missing a couple of members here, especially our town administrator representative. So how quickly would we need to put that design selection team together?
Well, you really don't need to have that team together until the RFS comes in. You
Okay.
have a couple of weeks
Okay.
to put that team together.
Okay.
And when I go to drop off the packages to the MSBA, they're gonna say, and who are the local, you know, so you have a couple of weeks
Okay.
to
Right.
to work that out.
Because like I said, a couple of members that aren't here today, especially our town administrator
Sure.
representative, I'd like him to be part of that discussion.
Absolutely.
Second, I have three questions. The second question has to do with what you were talking about the superintendent. And maybe I'm a little bit confused about visioning, and you were talking about the education plan and visioning and some deadlines in January. Is that separate and apart from these public forums that we're going to be having relative to securing input from the community as opposed to what they want to see in the project?
It's a different kind of input. Yes, the visioning is about getting people together to talk about adjacencies. So if you had a carpentry program and a theater program, you might say, gee, wouldn't it be great if the carpentry and the theater program went together? They're on opposite ends of the building. And so it's looking at that. And then you're looking at cross-disciplinary training, you know, whether it's training of the teachers or collaboration. Those are the things that we look at, like how could the school operate better? So it's visioning, but it's also, you're talking about a lot of other things, best practices, what's happening in other schools, separate from the community where we're going through a design process and we're reporting to the community, this is where we are. You know, we have 6 options we're looking at and bringing them along in that conversation as well.
I think my question is more from a mechanical standpoint, because looking at some of the other websites of other municipal projects throughout Commonwealth, I noticed, for example, and my fellow committee members have heard me say this before, Stoneham, for example, and I noticed that in one particular time period in July of maybe last year, I think, 2 years ago, they had a number of what they call visioning sessions, where they were bringing in people to give their input on this. So my question is really, when you were talking to the superintendent about visioning, you're not talking about doing that in January, are you?
Yes.
Oh, really, that soon?
Yes.
Okay.
Because in the visioning process, you can't really start your feasibility study until you complete your visioning process, because you're saying this is the direction we're going. And so to have those conversations so that it's clear the direction that the design team is going to be moving into in order to support the educational program, yes. That's the first thing that happens in a feasibility study is
So,
the visioning.
Let me just ask this, and I'll just follow up with one very quick question after this.
Sure.
And I guess I have a hard time understanding that, because what you're asking for community input before the feasibility study really gets up to speed and is complete. You're looking for input.
Correct.
Okay. But as a member of the community, how do I know what it is that we're looking at? I mean, we're looking at a renovation of this building, we're looking at a new construction, we're looking at a different site in a different community. How, as a member of the community, how do I come in and give you my vision if I don't actually know what the end result of this project
Good
is going to be?
question. You don't know that. What
Okay.
we're talking about are the spaces and the practices in the building. And we're not talking about the physical building.
Okay.
It's really more about the programming, and whether that happens in, you know, a new building or this building, it's still the same process. It's identifying the spaces, the adjacencies, you know, what do you have not happening in the school that you'd like to see happen now? Sometimes the constraints have to do with the physical space, and sometimes it has to do with the practices.
All right. And my last question is, you mentioned that you were on the DCAM design selection team?
Correct.
Okay. Can you just tell me, give me sort of an insider's view of this? Because I'm finding the MSBA processes and these review panels and these hearings to be, at best, perfunctory. There doesn't seem to be there weren't a lot of questions at the OPM review panel, which surprised me. I thought there would be significantly more scrutiny of the project, but there wasn't. Is that something is there something that goes on behind the scenes? Is there a lot of discussion among the committee members? Because the bona fides and the qualifications of the OPM review panel were pretty impressive, but they didn't ask a lot of questions. As a matter of fact, only one person asked a question of the process. And it surprised me because most municipal meetings, you're going to see multiple questions. Even on our district committee, we ask a lot of questions of our people who present. So can you give me a little bit of insider's background on the processes here?
Yes, so I would say this particular process that we went through, where Skanska are an own entity to the Mass School Building Authority, I'm not surprised. I don't mean that to sound arrogant or anything. I'm not surprised. They know our work. They're familiar with us. We've done over 20 projects with them. You might get to a facilities assessment subcommittee, and we're going to talk about the shape of the building, and you're going to find more questions there. With the designer selection, you will see questions. People are doing their work in advance of the meetings. They're reviewing the applications, they're making their assessments, and then they're voting. They're not necessarily having a big public dialogue about why they're doing what they're doing, especially since now Bernie's gone, because Bernie talked a lot at all of the meetings, and I haven't been back since Bernie passed away, but so I don't know how the culture of that board has changed. But if you read about it, they give you 15 minutes as a designer that might be really thoughtful for an hour and a half. Give you 15 minutes to present and 15 minutes for questions, and the process they're going to go through is a process I went through for 6 years. And basically, I'm using DCAM's process where I'm putting together a matrix. And any application in and of itself, might look great, but when you look at it across a matrix, then it pops. It's like, oh, here's the points of differentiation. Here's the distinction. Oh, their firm did this, but that team didn't do that work. And so we have the opportunity to be very, very thorough, and for the 3 members to speak up, and you can even have 6 members, but only 3 at the table. If you wanted, for example, to include the CEO from 3 towns and one other, SBC member, or your principal, but you have 3 voting members. But I think the opportunity there is to really, as a group, these are new distinctions in terms of evaluating these firms. And so I say new distinctions because most people haven't been through this process before. And the MSBA has been through it a lot. And they know by looking at the applications and the body of work, and they see references, right? We would have meetings with DCAM, and I would see references, and sometimes you'd say, oh my God, I wonder if they know this. This is the feedback that they got on that firm. And so, even though it's public, not all things are public, so to speak, unless somebody makes a public information request. So, I think that when you get into the feasibility study, when you get beyond forming the project team, you'll see a lot of engagement. You may even say, geez, I wish they weren't so engaged here, because it is a thoughtful process that they have. And this is one of many projects. You know, they might have 25 core projects at a time going, but they have a couple hundred projects going between the repair projects and, you know, they only have so many resources and.
Thank you. Kurt, did you do?
So the first 4 questions I have here are sort of all related to design, so why don't I save those for when we get to design conversations in the interest of time. But I would like to get some insights from you on building projects that have been completed and are open and functioning, that are really focused in on 21st century competencies and project-based learning, flipped learning, personalized learning type of models where there's a lot of voice and choice happening from students and a lot of collaboration and interplay between disciplines. So, those forward-thinking educational models where kids are learning the standards, but they're also gaining the experiences they need so that they develop these competencies to go on to college and career. So if you have some key sites we can visit, I sure would like to hear those while we're in sort of this visit phase.
I will speak to my colleagues, but right off the top of my head,
That's all I'm asking.
Minuteman right off the bat, because Minuteman teaches entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
they have their career and technical programs, they have robotics. In reading your educational plan at the stage that it's at now, it made me think of Minuteman.
Yeah. So, good news, download got back to us today for our visit to Minuteman. That appears to be scheduled in the books, I think. I should learn about it tomorrow.
Okay.
So Minuteman was at the top of our list. I came from the Natick system. They've been through 2 projects. There's some things to see there. There's also half a dozen other schools on our list, but we don't know what we don't know. So any guidance you can give on those types of
Absolutely.
things, that'd be great.
All right, does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Did we get the approval letter? I assume
Yes.
that is
Yes.
in-
Yes.
Received mine.
Yeah.
in the-
All right.
We
Don't
can
see-
talk more about the visioning part role that I would play in.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the outcomes of my meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
I think that's it. I want to thank Ms. Williams for
Thank
her
you.
time.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank you so much, it's very helpful.
I'm sorry I couldn't take my mask off.
No,
We have a
I'm
policy
usually
about
much
it.
So are we.
We're used to it, we're used to it.
Yeah.
But it was very helpful, the slides, the presentation, the color chart, and the answers to the questions, so thank you very much.
Yeah, and could you get that slide presentation to Ms. Marone?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so we'll do that. And I guess the only question I would have is in reading the letter from the MSBA, from Mary Piketty, that she was looking for an executed copy of the OPM contract.
Yes, that's on our agenda for this evening for a recommendation to the district committee, which will be meeting tomorrow night.
Okay, October 1st. And then the other thing, you have 2 documents so that we can file our reports with the MSBA. That should go to the superintendent.
Superintendent.
Yes.
So this just allows us to do input in the monthly reports and then also with the co-pay. Says that.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming, Pat, I could call you tomorrow and we could figure out, clean up the RFS and determine
Sure.
when we could send that to the MSBA. And, the schedule, the information was a lot of information. I was hesitant to bring so much information up front, but, I will be tweaking the timeline once we have definite answers on where we are with things.
Okay.
Okay.
You think that I should execute this once I have approval from the school committee, execute the contract as well, or do you need the contract?
This just gives us access to the Neshoba site.
Or,
Yeah,
right,
I mean, we have it for all the different sites, but
okay.
And then I put down where I can do the input so that if you need help with co-pay and all that, so I
Right.
can just use this instead of just looking at it. So.
even do a training together, which I would recommend,
Okay.
because they actually have really good trainings, and then that way, if you have questions, you have a contact there that you're familiar with.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, next on the agenda is the vote on recommendation to the district committee to authorize Superintendent Downing to execute the service agreement with Skanska. Now, before we get to that, we have a parliamentary issue which we have to address. Jen, I need you to note the time at this point, and at this point, I'm going to let Ms. Cohen speak to a potential issue here. And,
Yeah, so,
Excuse me, where do I note the time?
Note
Under the agenda item B?
yeah, you're gonna note the time it is right now, because what's gonna happen right here is that, and I'm gonna steal a little bit of Amy's thunder. Amy may have a conflict of interest in regards to the selection of OPM, selection of Skanska as our OPM.
Okay, I know the
So-
time is 7:36.
Okay, so the reason I want that in the minutes is because Amy has to leave the room while we have this discussion. And the reason she has to leave the room is because she's been advised by legal counsel to recuse herself, not to abstain from the vote, to recuse herself. And that means she has to leave the room. She cannot count towards a quorum. Now, we don't have an issue with a quorum tonight, but irrespective of that, she's going to be required to vacate this meeting, and it should be noted in the minutes the time that she leaves, and then note the time that she comes back once we're done with this. So,
Okay.
you have anything further to add? Okay.
No.
Then
Thanks.
I'll-
Thank you, good night.
Good night, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah, just hang out, we'll come back and get you when this discussion is over. Thank you, Amy. All right, so in regards to the contract, Pat, do you have anything to add to this? Did you deal with Peter in the negotiation of that contract?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we went over it extensively, and there wasn't anything that needed to be changed. It's a standard contract that MSBA gives to us. Basically, we just fill in our information, and it's been reviewed by him, and he said everything looks good.
Is there anything particularly you'd like the committee to know about this, or anything special, anything unique? Anything that you'd like to highlight?
I think that, I'm on the spot here, I probably, and I look at a number of contracts every day. I think that a lot of the language in the contract, I think, is standard and, you know, in accordance with procurement, you know, Massachusetts procurement. And I wish I had had some time to go over this to go highlight anything that I found was really memorable. If you could maybe let me look at it a little bit more and bring it up at another time, I prefer to do that
All right.
at this point.
Okay, so we still need to
Yeah.
make a recommendation this evening to the district committee. So I understand it's an extensive document, and I apologize for putting you on the spot here. Okay, so I will entertain, if anybody has any questions regarding the contract at all?
I do.
Oh, go ahead, Trent.
What's the plan for an attachment A in the payment schedule? The not to exceed fee and the completion date for all the phases except for first is one. Does that mean that they'll be subject to future negotiation and/or amendment? How does that work?
Could you repeat your question?
Sure, and maybe I'm misreading it. The attachment A, the project phases, item to work, is not to exceed fee and a completion date for the feasibility and schematic design phase. And then there's other phases, which is, I think are blank, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean that those dollar amounts in those phases will be subject to negotiation at a later date?
Yeah.
Yes.
Only been authorized by the MSBA to do the feasibility, so we
Right.
can't negotiate any fees beyond that.
Right.
Yeah, this is just the first phase.
Yeah. All right. No, I was
Did that go out email? Did I miss that?
This document did come out, well, it's in part of the meeting material.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right. So I downloaded it and I didn't print it out. All right. thank
Well,
you.
it's killing a lot of trees. It's 25 pages, and, all right.
I did think of one thing, that I just want you to know that I did negotiate this contract to be lower than what was initially brought forward. I went back and forth, Peter and I talked about different things where we could see adjustments, and this is a little bit lower, not a lot, but we had to make some decisions as to where we wanted to make changes, and where we felt that changes in, if you look at like the hourly rates and things of the, like Dale Cobbler, we negotiated his rate down. And the number of hours that he estimated in this contract that he would be using, he kind of dialed that back a little bit because he didn't feel that he would actually be, you know, participating as much as he was estimating in this
Okay.
contract.
For those of you who don't know, Mr. Caldwell is the, I guess they call him the account manager.
Yes,
And I think he's actually on
he's the senior.
Yeah, on the flow chart, he's right above Ms. Williams. And
Yes.
he was the one that presented, as long with Ms. Williams at the interview, so. I'm sorry,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
it just, really the only leverage that we had at that point was looking at the minimum comps, and so we were able to look at the minimum comps to get those reductions in those fees.
Are there any further questions? Ms. Vibrito?
I wonder if, so what I'm noticing is that the OPM fee is nearly close to a third of our money. And so is that typical? Because that, it seems to me that if we're only gonna have $1 million for the architect, is that really compensate?
I spoke to her about that, because when we were negotiating the fee, I said I didn't want to be in a position where I had to go back to the towns and ask for more money.
Yeah.
And she assured me that she thought that the schematic design phase would come in a lot lower, probably less than $1 million anyway, so we're right in line with where we should be as far as what we have authorized by the towns.
It's like the fox is guarding the hen house a little there, but, yeah,
Well,
but we have to trust,
I
right?
think there's some information on the MSBA website that tells us, did we see some charts, Ken, that said how much the OPM was compared to the whole feasibility study and the percentage and stuff like that? So we can go back and look at that. But you know, we can find out some comparable things. If you want me to go report out to the committee next meeting, I'll see what I can find.
I don't necessarily want to gum up the process here, and I know that we're on a timeline, and we need to vote to authorize tonight, and vote tomorrow night is the next meeting.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there and say, we don't want to go back to the towns for more money. We were kind of given a cap by the towns,
Right.
that 1.5 was as much as they would support, so.
And I made that very clear, that that's the way it was in the town, and in all three towns, that we wouldn't go over that amount. And she assured me that it would be somewhere between 700 and 900 and something thousand.
And it feels like the RFS actually had that range in it as well.
Yes.
For the designer,
Yes.
the design team. And the design team contains all of the consultants, and, I mean, it all comes out of that.
Yes.
And so if the OPM is 423, I think that's what I'm saying,
Right.
and let's say that the design team is $1 million, is $75,000 enough to cover kind of any other costs? Are there any other costs?
75,000.
Am I wrong there?
Let's 1 million plus
Yeah.
423.
I would say so at that point.
Okay. So we're feeling confident that we have the money we need.
At this point, yes, I would say so. It's in her best interest to advise me. I mean, if it doesn't, then the whole thing will collapse. So it's in her best interest for this to stay under that number.
Okay.
All set? All right, anybody else?
Well, you know, that goes back to her point, not that we have to decide it, that we advertise fee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can advertise.
That's right.
All right.
All right,
I'll make a motion
okay, go
to
ahead.
authorize Superintendent Downing to execute a services agreement / contract with Skanska USA for the retention of the owner's project manager services attendant to the Neshoba Regional High School building project.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Mr. Sikansky seconded that. Is there any further discussion on the matter? No? No? Okay, I'll call the roll. Mr. Sikansky?
Aye?
Ms. Vivrito?
Aye.
Mr. Hartnell?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Right.
Ms. Early?
Yes.
Ms. Dittrobon?
Yes.
Ms. Cosentino?
Aye.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Puig? And myself, yes. It's unanimous.
Great.
All right.
Okay.
All right, note the time. I'm
Okay.
going to get Ms. Cohen back in here. Oh, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, yeah.
7:45.
I'll wait for Amy to come back.
What did you say?
Is the conflict going for this evening?
You're retiring.
Might there be other
What?
instances in the future?
I didn't have a lot of chance to talk to her. Today. She basically had told me that
Game over.
she had
Thanks for
contacted
playing.
our legal counsel and she had done some work with Skanska in the past, so.
Well,
It may be an
I'll
ongoing
be
thing. I'll
60.
have to check with her.
So I might need a little bit more.
Perhaps when we negotiate their next
Maybe
round
two
of
more.
fees.
It all depends. Mhm.
All right.
Okay, she's back.
Yay.
All right.
Thank you, Amy. All right. So the next matter on the agenda is another vote for recommendation to the committee regarding the request for services. And that would be for Ms. Maroney to issue the request for services for designer services.
I'll make a motion to authorize Ms. Maroney to submit for approval to the Massachusetts School Building Authority a request for services for design services.
Thank you. Can I second?
Second.
Ms. Viverito seconded. Okay. Is there any discussion on this? Go ahead, Leah.
So the document isn't exactly final, right? So.
No, not right now. Actually, it is what they call a red line document, and we made changes to customize it to our district, and it will be submitted to MSBA, and they'll make any changes, and Skanska helped with this already, so.
And so,
Your
Wait,
phone
wait.
number's wrong in it, so.
I have
Wait, hold on. Are you done?
Okay.
well, I just wanted to make sure that I understand what to tell the committee tomorrow night. So in authorizing Pat to submit this RFS to MSBA, we will no longer have any further oversight over the proposal, right? Like it's now out of the committee's hand and we are dependent upon the OPM and Pat to finalize language if need be.
Correct.
Go ahead.
My question is regarding whether we should, if we choose to advertise a fee for the designer, does that need to be incorporated into a request for services? As OPM
She
suggested in the.
didn't say
She didn't
that.
say that. No, she
Well, she
said,
didn't recommend it, but she said we could consider
It's
it.
in
but it
there.
comes at a later date, I think.
Yeah,
But I think that it's in the
was fine.
RFS right now. The range is in that document. It says like between 700,000 and $1,050,000.
Okay. I admit, I did not look.
Well, it also mentions the possible construction, the range of construction costs, not project costs, but construction costs. So, if you think about it as a percentage of that, that's where the
Okay.
700 to million comes from.
Are there any further questions? Go ahead, Leah.
So it seems to me that we should probably discuss if we're okay with putting that fee range in there at this point, because Pat is going to have to either take it out or leave it in.
I think the fee range is appropriate. I don't see any reason to change the fee range at this point in time.
Not change it, but eliminate it, because she was saying that I think she recommended we put it in there.
She did, she recommended that, she did. Yeah, so I would go with what she recommends, given their lengthy experience. That's why we're hiring them. They know more than us.
Wait, one time. Okay, so, all right, so go ahead, Leah. What were you saying?
So I just want to make sure that we are all okay with it being in there. It seemed to me that she recommended it, but she also said that we didn't have to provide it. And so as long as the committee is okay with that.
Where is that? Yeah, we're, I'm looking for the same thing.
What page?
No
I can
pages on
find
that?
it.
It's on page 3.
Yeah.
It's millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's the
Project,
total
not the-
overall project.
That's what our cost.
Not the fee, not the fee.
That's the construction cost.
I think actually there's a line that says the fee for basic services will be negotiated.
Oh, so I missaw it.
Yeah,
So then maybe we need to put it in. We're talking about whether or not the fee should be included in the RFS? Or
The
fee range?
template doesn't have it.
yeah, the template doesn't have it.
Mhm.
This is a straight out template.
So I would not add, if you want to add it, you've got to flag it as a special thing you're adding for the MSBA to review. And then they're going to question us about why we're doing it. And we don't have a good answer.
No.
Other than it was
Recommended.
advice of our OPM.
Well, no, I think she was talking about a separate,
At a late-
issuing a separate document or some kind of announcement.
At a later date, advertising, I didn't get
Okay.
the impression that it was part of the RFS. And my
Okay.
impression was that it was going to be advertised at a later date.
Or some kind of announcement.
With an announcement, she said you can even advertise it, meaning,
Okay.
yeah, put it out for
Well,
bid.
let me say, I don't know about you, Amy, but I had the same impression you did. I didn't get that impression that it was going to be advertised at a later date. I would think it would be part of the RFS so that they know what they're bidding on and what the fee is going to be.
Yes.
Go ahead, Attorney Huffman.
I mean, conceptually, prospective bidders can ask questions. I mean, we can say, we can either, it may not be in the template that's saying that, you want to know the fee, you can ask, or if a question is asked, do you know the fee, we can simply answer the question then, theoretically.
But let me put forth that for the OPM RFS, there was no fee
Totally
listed.
different though,
Why?
because you can't request, you can't like fix a fee for that. You have to select it first.
That's the same here.
Well, it's a different kind of procurement.
No, okay, okay.
It's a different process. of
But in any
procurement.
event, we got to an agreement without announcing it in the request for services.
Right.
I do have another question about this
Go
when
ahead.
we're done with this topic.
All right. Ken?
Well, just on that made me uneasy when we were doing the selection of the OPM, never having them have an idea, or us even have an idea of what their potential contract cost was. So I think that should be in this RFS so they know, so we're getting the right people to the table and not people who are going to be over that budget and just waste a lot of everybody's energy. So
I agree.
feel strongly it should be part of the
I think
RFS.
I think Mary Ann wants to accomplish that, but she doesn't want to put it in the RFS, which is why she said should be advertised separately.
Yeah, but that's,
Again, it's not part of the template.
but it's not really the OPM's decision in this regard. This is our decision. And I agree with Ms. Cohen. I thought that the representation was, put out your fee so that the people who are bidding on this know exactly what the fee is going to be, so that you don't run into what Mr. Froman just said, some uncertainties in regards to what you're going to be paying.
Okay, but we don't know how to set the fee properly.
You don't.
Don't we have a cap on what the towns have approved to fund for a feasibility study? And didn't we just approve a budget for an OPM?
We
So
did.
don't we know how much we have left?
Yes. That's my very elementary understanding of
And
it.
just like in this process, when we negotiated the fee, if this fee came in over 600,000, I would be very uneasy with anybody who had proposed that fee without negotiating it down. And if they wouldn't come down to where this number was, I probably would have gone to the next person down because it was too close. We would have had to do that.
But
it was a possibility, and we had discussed that if somebody came in too high, that we would just have to go down to the next person.
I would just ask that we, in this authorization and in this motion, we do it with the understanding that it is going to either be included or not be included in the RFS, whichever it is. It's fine, but.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? Because I have a question. So, my question is, and it follows off of Ms. Rito, the RFS that was sent to us is a red line version of this.
Mhm.
But then explain to me why on a red line version that we're going to recommend approval of this RFS to the district committee. I mean, if I were not part of this committee and this was presented to me tonight, I said, this is a red line version, this isn't a finalized version. Why am I approving a red line version?
Because all we're doing is approving
This is
Pat
MSBA.
Maroney
Mhm.
issuing it.
Right,
Right.
we're just, the
We're
motion
giving- we're
to
giving her-
authorize.
We're
Well,
giving
hold on,
her
hold
the
on.
authorization to
Yeah.
finalize the RFS.
That's the motion, that's what was in the agenda.
Right.
This is how the format that MSBA requires that we submit with the red line. But we submit it to them, they make changes. They might say, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, based on our particular project.
Okay.
And that's what we're waiting for. There isn't a final yet. This is just for submission.
Okay.
So at some point in time, if that's what we want to do, if we want to, we can find that out tomorrow. But this is just my initial submission.
So that's not going anywhere? Like,
That's not going
to be
anywhere.
public or anything?
No.
Until,
No, not
so
yet.
we would have another opportunity to come back and say, we could put it in or not put it in. Is that correct?
Yes, I would think so. I can't imagine why you wouldn't be able to.
So we have,
Well, just from, again, mechanical standpoint, I mean, I'm looking at this document, and when it was sent to me in red line, I was a little bit surprised. I thought this was an unfinished and incomplete document. And I was curious as to why we would be making a recommendation to the district committee to submit an unfinished and in-process document. So what you're telling me is basically that these are our suggested changes. These are going to go to the MSBA. The MSBA is going to finalize
Right,
the actual RFS to be submitted.
correct.
The,
And this is just getting your blessing. It's okay to move this process along.
almost everything you see in red in this document is copied out of the OPM RFS. I can't find anything that's truly new in here. The bullet points are the same, the summary of the description of the school, the goals are exactly the same as they are in the RFS. It's not a brand-new creation.
Which a lot of it has already been edited by MSBA.
Right, and reviewed
And
by
reviewed.
this committee and the school committee.
We've reviewed this, we haven't reviewed this document.
I think he means the OPM.
No, but where the background is, that's a cut and paste from the OPM RFS.
All right, so is there any further discussion on the matter? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion?
We already made
Oh,
a
you're, I'm
motion.
sorry.
And seconded by Ms. Viverito.
Okay, go ahead, Ann.
Do we need to make an amendment to resolve this discussion about the designer
Nope, I
fee?
don't think so.
Wait a minute, hold on. Hold on.
Only if we're
Hold
gonna
on,
add,
hold on. Amy, if you want to make an amendment, that's certainly your prerogative.
So if the motion goes through as now, there is no designer fee in it. So if you vote no against, I'd prefer to have the designer fee in the RFS. So I'd like to make an amendment that we include it.
Okay, you need to make a motion.
I move to include the designer fee in this RFS before we submit it to the
All
MSBA.
right. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Forsythe, is there any discussion on this amendment?
yes, there's no guidance as to how much that should be.
How about,
Is,
Go ahead.
but Pat, isn't there, we have a number for that, right?
All the
not to
leftover money?
exceed would be the balance of the money that was be going, the balance of the 423 or whatever, $1,000.
And that contract that you just approved is an estimate. If they came upon something unforeseen, it could be more expensive. I just want you to just keep that in mind. Or it could be less, which would give more money to put towards a designer. We don't have to spend all the money. So, I mean, if you put the lowest amount out there, you might not get any designers to come forward. I would just like to leave it open.
As a range, as a range.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask a
Go ahead.
question for clarification on that point? So is the motion, just to clarify the motion, is the motion to have a range or is the motion to have a cap? Because there's a difference.
The motion was amended to include the designer fee in the RFS submission to MSBA was made by Ms. Cohen. That's what the motion was.
Right. But,
Yeah, I don't think it was determined whether there's going to be a range or it's going to be a cap.
Nope, it just said designer fee.
So that's a good point. Should we look at a range or should we look at a cap or should we not look at all?
I don't think we know enough.
I
We'd be out, I think we'd be outsmarting ourselves
mhm,
to put that in this document at this stage.
I agree with Paul.
Remember, it's not going out to bid yet. We have an opportunity to meet with Mary Ann again in the next few weeks, ask her this specific question, and if we want to go back and make that specific change to the document, we can go to MSBA and do that.
Are we sure of that? That's my only question.
Yeah.
We can definitely go back to the,
That's fine.
We can go back to MSBA and say.
before the RFS goes out? Before it goes out?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Lynn.
I would say that Mary Ann's standing in the hallway, why don't we ask her? She's our consultant.
Is she in law?
I don't know,
She's still here.
don't know why she's still here.
I don't think.
We have a meeting after.
Yeah, but-
After the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah,
All right.
it's okay.
Yeah, let's,
These poor people.
Oh, I help. Feel bad for them. Oh, as much as wonderful as they are. Right, they're here, they're getting paid. She
I didn't
has
realize she was
intelligence that
hanging
we
around.
could benefit.
I didn't realize she was still here. We couldn't.
She is, yeah.
Yeah, we had a post 8 o'clock
I
meeting.
forgot, yeah. Did I not? I mean, I knew, because I'm going to be at that meeting also. I knew that, but I just forgot that she was supposed to be here also.
We still live in public meetings.
We love it. Thanks.
Hi.
Thank you.
We're back.
So
we got
Mary
an
Ann,
encore.
Okay. You
We
don't want to get me
have-
singing.
we have an issue that's come up in regards to the request for services.
Okay.
And based upon what you had represented in your presentation, it's the opinion of at least some members of this committee that it might be beneficial and prudent for the district to include a fee for design services in the request for services. But there are others on the committee who feel otherwise. So
Right.
it's been suggested that maybe you could give us some insight into this particular issue.
Yes. At the risk of repeating myself, the issue of having an unsuccessful negotiation at the beginning and tying up the process 3 to 4 weeks, if they have up to 30 days to negotiate the contract, I think in advertising the fee, because I'm in these conversations about fee on projects, that camera's still on?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, that I think it would be, if you look at the amount of, the level of effort, that in my mind, there's a reasonable number. I don't know if you're asking me for that number or not.
I think what we're asking is for some guidance on, because I think there's some division of opinion on this, guidance as to whether or not you would recommend we include a fee for services or we leave that open and subject to negotiation.
I would recommend that you include it,
Okay.
in the interest of time, that to keep the process moving.
Okay. Ms. Viverito?
So, is it at this stage when we're submitting the red line document to the MSBA that that range should be placed in there? Or should we wait and do it at a later stage?
I think we can talk to them. I would put it in there. I think if you put a range, it's human nature, it's gonna go to
Go to top, yeah.
top of the range. But I think what you'll do is that you will fair number, because they know the level of effort that's required, a fair number will, you know, attract the people you would want to attract to the project. And if the number is too low, or you go into negotiations and the number is too low, you know, that can be an issue.
Go ahead, Amy.
So part of the discussion is whether we should approach this as, you know, the communities have approved a certain amount of funding for the feasibility study. We've just approved a certain amount for an OPM contract, so would it be advisable to include a not to exceed fee for a designer based on the difference in those two?
Will you want to carry, you have 4 lines in your feasibility. You have the OPM, you have the geo-environmental, geotechnical, and then you have the other category. You want to say reserve some money for that. Those 2 categories, if you're looking at multiple sites, as an example, and you know, if you do a phase 1 environmental and you discover something and you need to do a phase 2, that would be additional services to the designer's contract. So you would want to have that money available without having to go back.
Good.
I don't think you can lose, I don't want to hang it up on, I don't think you could lose either decision you make. I just think that, you just have to be aware that you might not be able to negotiate with your first choice. If you advertise a fee and somebody pursues the project, you're moving into executing the contract and asking them for the work plan.
When you say advertise a fee,
In the request for service.
as part of the request for service?
Yes, you'll see in there that it actually states if the fee is to be negotiated or advertised.
Okay. Can we continue with this process of submitting the red line version until we can, and then go back to the MSBA and say we'd like to put this fee in there? Because I don't feel we can do a good job of coming up with the fee tonight.
I think that's very prudent. You submit the red line draft. Once they make their review comments, all they ask is if you make any more edits to send the final version to them.
Okay.
And do we know the timeline on that? When that, what is that period?
They would like to take up to 10 business days to review the red line draft. That's why, you know, longer it goes, you may miss a board meeting and then you're out to the next 2 board meetings. So I don't think it's an issue. I've got a call into the project manager there to ask her how soon she thinks she can turn something around in her review.
Good, Bob.
I think we were shooting for putting this in the register on October 13th. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so.
No?
Or maybe you are correct. You have my schedule, but I don't have my glasses on.
Is it on here?
No.
Okay, it's on some other document. What's that?
It's on the list of dates as well.
I'm sorry, I packed things up.
No, don't apologize.
But I want to answer your question.
No, we're looking at, let's see, yeah, let's see. The ads appearing on, yes, the 13th to appear.
So we've got to submit it 4 or 5 days before the 13th of October.
We're under it.
You want us, so, I'm sorry, okay. So if you submit it to the MSBA no later than the 28th, then the ad would appear on the 13th, so I stand corrected. and the RFP would be available on the 13th.
But we don't have to wait for them to come back. We can, while they're doing their initial review, we could meet, and we could meet next week and with your guidance say, okay, here's what the range should be, we could vote on that, and as they're reviewing it, we can add to what we've already submitted, so we don't have to wait sequentially. Right, so we can set a meeting tonight to meet next week to vote on that number,
Correct.
and just add it to that, and then we're not really losing a step or losing a lot of time.
Right, because
So
ideally, even this draft, and we need to correct a couple of dates, because I know this time, you know, we had at a certain point put this together, and now that we know where we are, we'll correct a couple of dates, and I know, Pat, you and I have to figure out, you know, can we do it for the school, and at what time, or what day, you know, so there's a couple of little things that we
Yeah.
knew
You're gonna amend.
we have to amend before we send it to the MSBA, but there's no reason why, I think with a conference call between the three of us, we couldn't just clean it up and then let the MSBA do their review and let that clock start ticking with the MSBA.
Right. In the meantime, you guys can work with Pat to come up with a range so you can educate us on what we
Yes.
should present as a range
Yes.
that we could vote on.
Yes.
That to me makes sense.
Mhm.
I think it should, the number should be in there, but I agree that we need to know what that number is.
Does anybody else have any questions for Ms. Williams? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion to amend the original motion on the floor. Jen, do you have the actual wording?
The motion was amended to include the designer fee in the RFS submission to MSBA,
Okay,
seconded by Mr. Fromer.
all right. Is there any further discussion on the motion to amend? We're just voting on the amendment right now.
I would just point out that I'm now fine with putting the amount in the RFS before it's published, but I don't know that we need to get it in to the one, to
Understood.
the MSBA.
Understood, right. Okay,
Correct.
right, okay, all right.
I don't know if you want to amend.
Sure.
You want to include that, okay, so,
Maybe we amend the amendment.
Withdraw the
You
amendment.
Can we just change your wording?
wait.
Parliamentary.
You can-
Somebody else could be secretary in about 2 months. About done.
So procedurally, we'll do it this way. So, Ms. Cohen, would you assent to a friendly amendment to your motion to amend, to include the language that Mr. Sikansky just stated? And Bob, why don't you just, once again, tell us.
Okay, that we will include, we will not include it in the submission to the MSBA, but we will include it to the published version.
So motion was amended to include the designer fee in the published
Version.
version of the RFS submission to MSBA. Motion was
No,
amended.
no, take out to the MSBA.
Okay. Motion was amended to include the designer fee in the published version of the RFS submission.
Correct.
Perfect.
All right, is that acceptable to you, Ms. Cohen?
It is.
Who seconded that motion? Mr. Farmer, is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Attorney Hartnett,
Aye.
Mr. Farmer,
Yes.
Ms. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Early,
Yes.
Ms. Deltramont.
Yes.
Ms. Cosentino.
Yes.
Ms. Bailey.
Yes.
Ms. Dupuy.
Yes.
Ms. Viverito.
Yes.
Mr. Sikansky.
Yes,
Attorney Gleason.
All
Yes, it's unanimous. All right.
thank
You
you.
don't have to unmute.
Okay.
What's that?
I think you're okay.
Oh, yeah.
I know, I didn't have to unmute with my typing problems.
You were clairvoyant to stick around. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So we now have to vote on the original motion now to authorize Pat to submit the RFP.
Yes,
So
so
you
now,
asked me about the CEO meeting after
Yes.
this.
Funny.
I think we need to finish this item of business, but the CEO committee has a meeting scheduled after this one.
Oh, all right, so this is the last issue of business, so we're gonna take the vote on the authorization for Pat.
And we will meet briefly.
okay, motion to authorize Ms. Maroney to submit for approval to the Massachusetts School Building Authority a request for services for design services. Approved Motion to authorize was me, Ms. D'Entremont.
Yeah, okay.
Motion was seconded by Ms. Viverito.
That motion, I'm sorry, who made the, who
I did.
You did, okay. Your motion is now amended to include the language that Ms. Cohen has requested. Okay,
Correct.
all right.
Motion was amended, I put that below,
Okay.
but we still haven't voted on the
Right, that's
original
correct.
motion.
Okay, so now we have to vote on the original motion. Is there any further discussion on that original motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll again. Mr. Sikansky?
Yes.
Ms. Viverito?
Yes.
Ms. Dupuy?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Ms. Cosentino?
Yes.
Ms. D'Entremont?
Yes.
Ms. Early?
Yes.
Ms. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Fromer?
Yes.
Attorney Hartnagel?
Aye.
Myself, yes.
Okay. Unfinished business,
We
none.
have none, so we're going to want to set a date, probably fairly certain, soon, for the next meeting. If for no other reason but to establish that fee for inclusion in the RFS. Hopefully it'll be a short meeting, maybe
Is
a
it
wide.
possible for it to be remote?
It will be unquestionably
Okay.
remote. And I will endeavor to make this a one agenda.
Ooh, that's gonna be awesome.
Because I don't, honestly, I mean, it's the first time we've all been together, I really am fearful of meeting fatigue, so I want to try and keep these meetings quick, short, and to the point. All right, anybody have any suggestions for a date? Go ahead, Ms. Cohen, Ms. Viverito.
It's okay. So I say maybe next Wednesday, the 29th at 6,
I have my community meeting in Stone that week.
at 7.
At 7.
So could we do a virtual one-item meeting?
I am not a voting
Right.
member of that, so.
I could do 6:30.
Yeah, no, okay. The 30th is open house, right?
The 30th is open house here, yeah.
That does not work for me, but
28th? Tuesday?
I'm a definite no for that, but I know that Chair Gleason can take some good minutes on that.
Yes, I'll take the minutes.
Okay.
I can't beat you, Jen. Okay.
So, Tuesday, 9:28,
9:28, at what time, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 6:30, what's the,
Maybe
Seven.
7?
7 o'clock?
7, fine.
All right.
I'll tell Rita.
All right, can I have a motion to that effect? So, someone want to move for the next hearing date? I keep saying hearing date, next meeting date.
I will make a motion
Thank you, Ms.
that
Viverito.
our next meeting will be next Tuesday, September 28th at 7 PM virtual.
Okay, and a second?
second.
Mr. Hartnagel, all right. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Viverito?
Yes.
Ms. Dupuy?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Ms. Cosentino?
Yes.
Ms. D'Entremont?
Yes.
Ms. Early?
Yes.
Ms. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Fromer?
Yes.
Attorney Hartnagel?
Aye.
Mr. Sikansky?
Yes.
Myself, yes. It's unanimous. All right.
Don't pack up yet, folks, we gotta make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, and when the
I'm
item,
making a motion to
the
adjourn.
item to be considered for the next agenda will be a one-item
Okay.
agenda. So we'll leave it at that, and,
I make
oh,
a motion to
wait,
adjourn.
hold on, and we'll have to approve the minutes of this meeting
Next,
and the two other meetings as well. So those will be two quick items on the agenda, all
Okay.
right.
all right. Any, so Chair Gleason, any things that I need to correct on my minutes of the 14th, you'll let me know then?
Yeah.
Okay, because you took the ones in June.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Motion to adjourn at 8:19
Are you
PM.
making that motion?
I am.
Okay. Ms. Cohen seconded it, it's not up for discussion, so thankfully.
All right,
Mr.
motion was approved.
Mr. Sikansky,
Aye.
Ms. Viverito,
Yes.
Ms. Dupuy, Ms. Bailey.
Yes.
Ms. Cosentino.
Yes.
Ms. D'Entremont.
Yes,
Ms. Early.
Yes.
Ms. Cohen.
Yes.
Mr. Fromer.
Yes.
Attorney Hartnagel.
Aye.
perfection.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, everyone.